Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to Talking Footy. Looking forward to the program. Our guest tonight is the captain of Richmond, Wayne Campbell, and the Tigers are going pretty well. They've won 3 out of 4. They're off to Perth this week to try and beat West Coast for the first time at Subiaco. With us, as always, Robert Walls and also Caroline Wilson. And Caro, welcome. What impressed you about the weekend, or what are you looking forward to?
Oh, well, I just think today, Bruce, we should say 7 years since, and hello, Robert.
Hi, Caro.
Since Kevin Sheedy and Gubby Allen and Alan McAllister went to Bruce Ruxton with this fantastic idea of Anzac Day. One of the great successes, I reckon, in Victoria in the days of the AFL in the 90s. It's never let us down, this game. Always terrific crowds. And I just think it's a bit disappointing, once again, to hear clubs like Richmond, and I think Hawthorn have had a bit of a go as well, say, well, we want to put our hands in the cookie jar. I just think they've done a great job, isn't it, in Collingwood, and it's a bit churlish to be hearing other clubs whinging about it today of all days. And
Woolsey, what about for you on the weekend?
Busy weekend, Bruce. Sydney on the Friday and then back to Colonial on the Saturday. Geelong was scary on the Sunday because it was so wet going down there. We almost had an accident, and then Big Rexy got his patrol absolutely bogged. It sunk a metre by the time we got out at 6 o'clock.
Is there any vision of this anywhere?
I don't think so. Then we had to wait 90 minutes for him to get towed out. But Kangaroos were fantastic. Saw that many torpedoes kicked in this game, and you'll see the condition of the ground. It was just absolutely waterlogged. There was some talk that perhaps the game may be called off. It was unsafe for the players. But the game went ahead, and the Kangaroos were great. They kicked 5 goals in that first quarter, only kicked 2 goals for the remainder of the game, and they won easily. And you'll see here in that first quarter, about 4 of their first 5 goals actually slid through. And some wag said perhaps Geelong needed a goalkeeper.
I think that wag was Anthony Hudson, actually, our commentator. He is a wag too, a good one.
Robert, a dramatic day at the end of a dramatic week for you, and it's been a dramatic few weeks. I mean, it seems like every week we sit down on the couch, there's been an issue you've had to deal with. We've all heard your explanation of the Shane Stremple incident that happened 10 years ago, but the toll on you personally over the last few days.
Well, look, on Friday when I read that headline in the Herald Sun, obviously I was devastated and disappointed, and I must admit I didn't feel much like getting up to Sydney for the game. But look, 2 or 3 days later, you've got to stand up for yourself and you've got to face problems when they come up. I got home on the Sunday night and I was quite proud that I was able to work my way through the weekend, give my side of the story, had a lot of support, and also at 50 I'm still not too old to learn. And I learned a lot over the weekend.
Can we expect the same Robert Walls that we've been seeing for the last couple of years as a media commentator?
No doubt. I went down to Geelong on the Sunday and I would have had a dozen Geelong supporters, people I didn't know, come up and say, listen, we like what you do because you tell it as you see it. We may not agree with it all the time, but at least we know it's your firm opinion.
Fair enough. Well, I want to go back to the weather for a moment. What a difference in Melbourne on Saturday. That was Sunday at Cardinia Park or Shell Stadium. This is Princes Park, Optus Oval. Early stages of the match, there was thunder, lightning, rain, atrocious conditions. Very hard to handle the footy, Brett Ratton and Darren Jarman included, and yet at the same time, 5 kilometres away with the roof on top, the Bulldogs were kicking 21 goals.
Well, I was at that game, Bruce, and you could hear the thunder outside, and it was really quite eerie because you knew that there was a storm going on outside, and yet the game was played in perfect conditions. And it was a good game. I was very impressed with the Western Bulldogs, their skill level, their passing and their forward setup. And I then saw what happened at Optus Oval, and I know that was a contest too, and it was a contest at Geelong in the wet, but watching footy, I would have preferred to have seen what I saw at Colonial.
So just briefly, what about the roof?
It's absolutely ridiculous that they have to wait until, what is it, half an hour before the game to close the roof. The coaches have criticised it. Ian Collins, who runs Colonial Stadium, was very angry. The AFL, I think, has been really childish about this, Robert.
I think they should close the roof. If there's any chance of rain, they should close the roof, and as soon as possible, because the coaches need to be able to talk to their players and say, well, look, these will be the conditions that we will play under. There won't be any mud or there won't be any rain, so it does make a heck of a difference, and they need to have at least 2 or 3 hours to say, hey, these are the conditions that we are definitely going to play under because the roof will be closed.
There's obviously some communications problems between Colo and the AFL at the moment. What about communications between the Bulldogs and Richmond? There's been a resolvement in all of that today.
Yeah, well, Richmond have apologised. Clinton Casey, I think, has I think he's done the wrong thing in apologising, because he was so strong the other day, and some people said what he was doing was stupid, to come out a week after it should have died down and stick up for his captain and his coach the way he did. Richmond supporters who thought it was terrific are now saying, well, you've backed down. Why have you backed down? I think he's a very new president, and I hope he learns from this, but I think he has made a bit of a fool of himself.
Quickly on Joseph Goodnick and the AFL, is that come to a resolution?
No, that has definitely not come to a resolution. Joseph Goodnick and Wayne Jackson had breakfast a month ago and made a pact to treat each other with more respect and go to each other when they had problems. Well, that's all just totally fallen apart again.
Didn't last long.
Joseph Goodnick has gone back to the AFL with an explanation for his comments last week about David Schwartz. He says that if the AFL go ahead and fine him, he will sue the AFL. So far from resolved. Some personal issues there, and I think Wayne Jackson has got to stop this divisive behaviour, the head of the AFL, in telling presidents that their boards are not all behind them, or their chief executives are not all behind them. I think that's very divisive.
You're making some strong comments tonight. What about charging? We've had 7 players up. 6 have got off, only Jeff Farmer. 2 matches very early on. This is Jared Malloy, who wasn't suspended. We had James Hird and Nathan Buckley confused about it yesterday at the press conference, not knowing which way to go. What
if Jared Malloy had been charged with unduly rough play? Would he have been suspended then?
He may have been. I thought, under the current rules, I thought that was a fair decision at the tribunal. Darren Gasper did have the football. He was hit in the head, and that's why he got the free kick. But what
do we do about this charging problem?
Well, I think we've got to have the AFL Rules Committee and the Players Association get together and say, this is what we believe is a charge, and show us on video examples. There are thousands of hits and charges on the videos. Show us what's a charge, send that to the coaches, send that to the clubs. Everyone then knows where they stand, because at the moment we see that sort of thing, and half of us are saying, yeah, should be rubbed out, the other half are saying, oh no, that's okay.
And what must it be like for the players who don't actually know what is legal and what is not? I mean, clearly it's hampering some of them in what they're doing, and the AFL is saying they're going to talk about it again in June at the Rules of the Game Committee, but they don't clarify it to me in any sensible way at all.
Yeah, they've got to sort it out, because just total confusion at the moment.
A week's a long time in footy, as you found out, Robert, over the last week. What about for Gary Ayres? This reaction from the Crows players was really graphic, wasn't it, on the weekend? This is real support for a coach.
I reckon that is sensational. Now, if there are any doubts that the players weren't behind Gary Ayres, forget it, because you don't see that very often, and I think for Gary Ayres' sake, that is the best confidence booster that he could possibly have, and good on him. And Mark Rasciuto, the captain, you see he came in towards the end there, put his arm around the coach, and I reckon that's good for Gary Ayres, because he's been under pressure. The board have been supportive, but we all know that doesn't always mean that much. But when the players openly show their affection for the coach, I think anybody who's got any doubts about the relationship, you've got to say, hey, they're tight.
We're going out to Essendon, the big match tomorrow that Caro talked about, and they really have made this day very special in Victoria, Essendon and also Collingwood. We do have the teams. There are 3 changes to the Essendon team and 2 to the Collingwood team. But we're going to Robert Shaw right now, who's in the bunker in the match selection room. Robert, thanks for joining us, the assistant coach at Essendon.
It's a pleasure, Bruce.
You must look forward to this match too, just like the rest of us. It has become one of the days in Australian sport.
Yeah, well, I've only come in on it lately, which is since the start of '99. But it's just a huge day for our football club, and one that's very, very close to Shooty's heart, and that he's worked very, very hard to develop. And I, for one, know how important it is to him to not only put on a good show for Essendon, but to get the people there to celebrate what is probably our most important day in our calendar.
Yeah, he actually sat next to me in a plane one day and went last year and talked about having football all around Australia, basically from noon through to midnight, celebrating this day. So he's prepared to share it, I think, in that way. We're going to have a look at the 2 teams, Robert. And there have been a couple of changes. Collingwood have got McKee and Steinfort back in. Roach and Batheris are out of the team.
McKee's important, Bruce, because it means Josh Fraser can spend time in the forward line. He's still a young, developing player. Anthony Rocker back in better form at centre-half forward. Chris Tarrant is the real danger player for the Bombers. He just takes that many marks. He covers so much ground. And, of course, who will tag Nathan Buckley?
And 3 changes for the Bombers. Lloyd, Blumfield and Rioli. Not a bad trio to bring back into what looks a supercharged team anyway.
Well, young McVeigh, we've we've seen McVeigh the last couple of weeks do tagging jobs. He did it on Camporeale against Carlton, Maxfield against Sydney. I wonder if Kevin Shooty would give him the big challenge on Nathan Buckley. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, you've got the lineups on your board, Robert. Has McVeigh got the job on Buckley?
Well, it's about 11 o'clock at night, and I've been here ever since trying to fix Shooty's team up. But McVeigh, yeah, he'll be there.
Will he be on Buckley?
Oh, look, he played very well on the wing. Look, they're both the paper side, so look, there's no doubt they're going to change, Bruce.
What, Josh Fraser's not going to play on the wing for Collingwood? What are you talking about?
Oh, look, he's the tallest wing in AFL history at 6'7", but the scary thing is he could, I suppose. He's a very good player, but we're going to worry about this bloke. Duncan Kellaway did a terrific job on him last week, and I was talking to Wayne Campbell just before. We really haven't got a Duncan Kellaway type, so the likes of Carousel or Blumfield, those sort of blokes, Mark Johnson, Solomon, will probably have to take a turn on him because he's in outstanding form.
Robert, I'm interested in you giving Sheeds a hand. It was interesting the other night against Carlton. A big point was made of the fact that the assistants didn't assist that night at three-quarter time, and in fact Kevin did all the coaching, and that was seen as a bit of a panic station sign.
Our perception was, and I think Robert wrote that, and it's probably an interesting point as a fellow coach observing. We only get involved when we have no specific role to play other than when we're needed. If there has to be something done with the back line, Mark Harvey will take them. If there has to be something said about the midfield rotations or our forward structure, then he might give them to me. But we have no hard and fast rules about splitting teams up. Generally we do it because Sheets likes to have a bit of a rest, have a look at the team board. But I would say that 60 to 80% of the time that Sheets would do the majority of the work.
Rob, tell us who's next to Dustin Fletcher's name, because when I see him play, there's no one on him.
Oh, look, that's got a fair bit of airplay this week, and I guess the fact is that, look, last week we had Masiti, Blumfield, Heffernan, Rioli out. We played 2 first gamers, and like Carlton did against us the week before, where they probably looked at their list and said, well, Michael Mansfield said they weren't going to take us on in the shootout, and probably we were a little bit wary of Sydney's form, playing up there, 2 first gamers and 3 or 4 real key players out. I think we needed to give our side a little bit of protection and to probably work harder in the tactical department than we did against Carlton, where we got a bit of a lesson.
It's an interesting point because James Hird, I think he also was pretty anxious before the match as he revealed to Dipper after the win against Sydney.
Yeah, it's one of the best, I reckon, since I've been to the club. You know, we got kicked last week, and the guys were pretty down all week, but we lost Lloydie and Joey and a few other guys that come up and win. I think it shows the character of these players, and, you know, we're here to stay. Dipper, we're not one-year wonders, and we're going to have a great year this year.
Interesting reaction, and not one-year wonders. I mean, this is your big challenge, isn't it, Robert?
Oh, look, it's interesting. I think the emotion of wins when you have got a bit of a backs to the wall is very important. Darren Jarman has rated that at the Adelaide game as one of his best. Brett Ratton was outstanding in his praise of Carlton's effort, said it was in his top 10, and Hird said that. And sometimes I guess that when you have players out and you have a tactic and it works, everyone shares in the enjoyment, and they are games that you put in the video recorder and you remember them.
Well, Robert, Kevin talked last week very specifically about having had his back to the wall many times. It's when he's at his best, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I think I guess it may be when we're all at our best. We talk about this backline mentality, myself, Mark Harvey and Sheeds. The majority of our coaches are backline players. And it just put us in a position where if we were getting a bit carried away with ourselves, which I don't think we were, we got outplayed against Carlton. And it was just a real week of planning, a reality check, to use an old cliche, and to get back to some really good planning and some really good solid footy.
Robert, thanks for your time. We know you've hung around tonight and giving us that insight into Essendon and how they're preparing for tomorrow. We wish you well for tomorrow's match and the rest of the season.
Thanks very much, Bruce.
Terrific. Robert Shaw there from Essendon. We're going to take a break, and I'm looking forward to talking to Wayne Campbell, the captain of Richmond, right after this.
We're talking footy.
Back to Talking Footy. Our guest tonight, the Richmond captain, Wayne Campbell. Wayne, welcome. I bet you're a lot happier than you were 2 weeks ago when you were 1-1, having been beaten by the Bulldogs, sitting on 3-1 right now.
Yeah, I think we've responded pretty well to that. Obviously, big couple of weeks, but No, to play the Pies in front of a big crowd of 78,000 and come through with a win, which we haven't done in the past over probably the last 4 or 5 years, it was, yeah, it was satisfying.
And it was one of the old-timers that helped you a bit at the end in Paul Broderick, and what a wonderful stalwart he's been. But the fact that you got yourself into trouble again in the last quarter must have been a bit disturbing.
Yeah, we certainly spoke about it during the week, but we've spoken a fair bit about Paul Broderick as well. It's his 150th game for Richmond this week. He played 93 with Fitzroy, and I think he said today he's missed about 6 or 7 games in that period, and I mean he's probably the most admired player at the footy club, as you would know, Wolsey, and we're just set for a big one this week for him.
Well, that's terrific, Wayne, because in the time I was there, I thought he was one of the most professional players at the club and a great role model. But what about young Brad Ottens now? He's just playing with confidence, and we'll see here. This is in the closing stages of the game now. You've got a big ruckman who can have the confidence to do that. Look at the way he holds the footy in one hand now. That's Kutafiti's style. How good is he?
Yeah, he was almost showing off a little bit there, wasn't he, Brad? Yeah, I mean, he's 6'7", and to run away like that, he's got a little bit of a sore ankle as well, I suppose. And
Nathan Buckley on his tail.
Yeah, I think in Bucks' defence, Bucks had spent a fair bit of time on the ball, whereas Brad had been forward a bit, so he had a little bit more energy from him. But certainly, yeah, to have a player that can do that at that height's pretty handy for us.
We've already talked with Robert Shaw about Duncan Kellaway. Having him back in the side has been terrific, obviously. He frustrated Nathan Buckley, didn't he?
I'm not sure whether he frustrated him, but yeah, he certainly had a great night. And after he'd come back from his last knee reconstruction, it probably took him a year to get going, but this year it's taken him about 2 games. So just to have a defender like Gasper that you can put on the best forward and know that he's probably not going to have that much of an influence, and then to have an on-baller like Kellaway to put on, you know, Buckley, who's probably, you would say, the best on-baller in the league, and just know that he's not going to have too much of an influence on the game.
Does he? We're looking at these stats with Kellaway versus Buckley, and they're pretty significant from Richmond's point of view. Does he really set himself for Buckley? Do you have a feeling around the club when you're coming up for Collingwood?
No, I think he just sets himself for every week. Yeah, I mean, he's just a humble guy that goes about his business pretty well and very, very low-key. But when he gets on the ground, he just sets his sights on a player and does well.
And what about for you? That enormous football event that happened a fortnight ago on the field and then off the field, which took so many twists and turns, has been resolved, we've heard from Caroline tonight, with Clinton Casey apologising to David Smorgan and the Western Bulldogs club. I mean, just what are your thoughts about it now?
Oh, so many, Bruce. I think, yeah, it was certainly the biggest week of my footballing life. You learn a whole lot about it, and you learn a lot more about the lows than you do about the highs. And certainly there were a lot of low points that week, but I think the footy club came out of it looking pretty well. I would have to disagree with Caroline there about Clinton coming out making a fool of himself. I think there was a lot spoken about the timing of his speech. Without going back on it, I think we hadn't said anything all week. Basically, the Tribunal was on the Wednesday night. On the Thursday, the Bulldogs had a bit to say. Good Friday was obviously Good Friday. And then Clinton, I think when your president's speech, you tend to reflect on the week that's gone, and he did that, and he came out quite strongly.
And I applauded him for that, but I thought it was a pity that he backed down yesterday, Wayne.
No, I don't think he actually backed down. From the press release that I've seen, that he apologised to David Smorgan and Terry Wallace by saying that they hadn't condoned his action, but I think that's probably fair enough as well.
Wayne, when you spoke at the Tribunal and you said, this is what I saw, did you get support in the following days from players from other clubs?
Yeah, certainly, yeah, and I think you learn a lot about yourself in those times, but you learn a lot about other people as well, and there was certainly just some fantastic phone calls and letters and stuff from people, and some of the other side as well, some letters from probably Western Bulldog supporters who weren't too happy with me, but that's the way it goes, and you come through those low times a lot better and a lot stronger, and I know that's all cliched and stuff, but as you would know, as you said, you got back home on the Sunday and felt proud that you got through it. Well, there was certainly some low times where I thought, gee, I probably wish I hadn't seen it, because it would have made my life a whole lot easier.
Sure. Yeah.
This whole code of silence, Wayne Carey and Mick Malthouse, and I think Dennis Pagan as well as Wayne Carey were not supportive. They felt that, and wrote articles, that what happens on the field should stay on the field. That was right in the heat of the battle when those articles were written.
I think the code of silence still does exist, and I think if there's... Because I think I didn't read Mick Malthouse's article, but I think the gist of it was that there is a respect that in the course of play there's going to be incidents that happen that you realise that people didn't mean it, and that maybe, that's the way it goes. But there's certain incidents that I think on the field that Brisbane stood up for 2 years ago that that aren't on, and that's why I stood up at the time.
Wayne, personally also, and the club, were questioned in terms of their toughness. In fact, the word marshmallows was used in one newspaper article. Another newspaper article said, and here we see you going towards Liberatore when you came back on, another newspaper said Richmond had no one who could indulge in payback time, even if they tried it. How do you feel about that?
We can't do anything about what people write other than win games, and I think we've done that the last 2 weeks. That was silly, what I did there, there's no doubt about that, but you live and you learn, and we won the next 2 games, and gee, I'd like to see what Collingwood and Brisbane said about whether we're hard at the ball or not. I mean, we can't do anything about what people write other than win games, and we've done that so far.
Wayne, did you feel when you were made captain that you had to be more aggressive? Personally, I feel you don't have to, because the way you play is strong enough. But with a charging incident earlier in the season, I just got the impression that you may have thought, I've got to take another level of aggression in my game.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that incident has been overplayed a little bit, and certainly I've never done that before to hit someone like that. But I think
are we talking about the Metropolis incident?
Yeah. And I think people just look for reasons for things, and you look at that and you go, okay, he's captain, so therefore that's why he's done that. And I can tell you that I was never told to be more aggressive. I never thought that I would be more aggressive. I spoke to one journalist about it and told them that I think that the Melbourne game, round 1 of last year, I was probably more aggressive than I'd been this year. So,
But Danny Frawley told you, didn't he, that he was going to judge you as much as a leader as how many possessions you got on the field. And by leadership, we all sort of think about toughness.
Oh, that's not leadership, I don't think, what I did there. I don't class that as leadership.
No, I'm not suggesting that, but that was something Danny sort of said to you.
Yeah, I think any coach would say that they would judge their captain on their leadership skills as well as their possessions. But getting possessions is leadership as well. But there's just so many things that encompass leadership. But at no time did he tell me to be more aggressive or anything like that.
One more little one on the whole Liberatore stuff. To me, you've always struck me as an unusual sort of bloke for a footballer. I mean, you're quite articulate, and people say you're perhaps more intelligent than the average footballer. Robert rates you very highly, but I think people who don't know you don't. I think you've misunderstood to a large degree. Did you feel even more won out after what happened against the Bulldogs?
No, not really. There's a lot of footballers that are very intelligent out there.
No,
I think you underestimate footballers,
they're all dunderheads, Wayne. But I think you know what I'm saying. You were a media performer, and then you sort of disappeared for a while, and there was the suggestion you might leave the club. I mean, you've just been singled out a bit at Richmond. They've thrust this leadership thing upon you because they believe in you, and that's terrific. But I just felt that it must have been even tougher on you to be won out again over the Bulldog stuff.
Yeah, the club were incredibly supportive, and Danny was very supportive. Mark Brayshaw was fantastic, and Clinton Casey, through coming out and saying what he said, was just really, really made a stand for himself, I think, and for the club. And they were as supportive as anyone could be. The players were fantastic. The players really didn't have anything to do with it, really. I think.
I'm talking in the football industry, Wayne, not at Richmond, where I know you had full support.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's not much I can do about what people think or say.
Do you think it's misunderstood?
I must admit, having coached against Wayne for 5-6 years when I was up at Brisbane, I didn't realise he was as good a player, and obviously I didn't know his character, and his character is first rate once you get to know him. He's a wonderful young man. But I think a lot of people out there don't give him the credit that is due to him, but I've got no doubt that when his career is over, they will.
I just want to go back to that week one more time. You said to Woolsey on air that you didn't see the incident or you couldn't remember it, and then you came out and talked about it and went to the Tribunal 3 days later. I mean, what lesson did you learn from that?
Footy's, you just learn something every time, and so you think, okay, when that happens again, I won't do that. But the same thing never comes up again, so you just got to keep learning. And I've made a massive mistake. I think the club made a little bit of a mistake.
Did you sit on that mistake for 3 days knowing it might come out?
No, I just forgot all about it. I mean,
I would say, Bruce, that immediately after a game, and that was the 3AW situation, I spoke to Wayne and I said, did you see what happened? He said, no, I didn't. Well, I'm telling you, 100% of players immediately after the game would have had the same reaction.
Has anything happened in footy this year that hasn't involved you?
Well, I hope it happens in a hurry. Wayne, a couple of years ago, you almost left Tigerland. I've got a theory. I may be right or wrong. I believe that with the chance that you could leave, you didn't go. But I have a theory that it shook the club up. And it shook the club up to the extent that from that time on, there's been a lot of changes there. You know, coach, CEO, president, attitude. Maybe a hard one for you to comment on, but I believe that you almost leaving that club really shook them up, because I believe that you were the only one strong enough to say, hey, I don't reckon things are being done here as well as they should be.
I mean, certainly that was the reason why I decided to make that decision, yeah, but subsequently what's happened, I'm not sure whether that was because of my decision or not.
What about Matthew Knights and Wayne Campbell?
I'm under the pump, aren't I? The last 2 weeks have been fantastic for us.
The two of you?
Yep.
So the liver thing's brought you closer together, you think, in a funny way?
No doubt.
You were a bit apart before that?
No, look, for the 10 years that we've played together, we've been for the first 6 years, we were just teammates. For the next 4 years, we were captain and vice captain and pretty good friends, I would think. I took the captaincy off him, or was given the captaincy or whatever. I mean, he's got to be a little bit, not funny towards me, well, I don't know what the word is, but I mean, I'm the one that's replaced him. He's gone about it just so professionally. Just to train, to play, to put the face on that he's put on has just been tremendous. Now, this act of what's happened over the last 2 weeks has probably just broken down that little bit of funniness, and we're going very well.
But it's not only the captaincy you took off him, you're taking marks off him as well. Caroline found this for us this morning.
Oh, no.
A bit of rivalry there against the Demons, wasn't there, Wayne?
You wouldn't believe how much I've copped it over that.
Yeah. You didn't even look back to say, well, maybe it is yours, Nida.
It was definitely his. Definitely his.
Gee, no wonder you told the truth next week.
Yeah.
So what do you say to a bloke when you take the captaincy off him, even though you didn't take it from him? I mean, you were given it. What do you say to someone who has honestly said publicly that he's devastated by losing the captaincy?
I've said this a few times. He was man enough to say, like the first time I saw him, he said congratulations, which I thought was great. He never had an issue with me taking it over. It was just the fact that he didn't have it. So we sat down for an hour and had a chat about the reasons why, and I had no idea about the reasons why and everything like that. It was just as much a surprise to me as it was to him. So as good friends and as strong a relationship as we had, we were able to just sit down and talk about it. And now after that, he's been still disappointed by it, but the footy that he's played in the first 4 weeks shows that he's pretty switched on.
You're still speaking to Mick Sheehan, aren't you, Caro? So there you go. There you go. We'll take a break.
A low blow.
It wasn't low, no, I admit it. These things happen in life. They do. Things go on. We all go on. A motivation table. I'm looking forward to seeing this. This is what was played to the team before the Brisbane game when you've turned this early part of the season around. Welcome back to Talking Footy once again. We've been talking about the Western Bulldogs game with Wayne Campbell, the Richmond captain. The Tigers were 1-1 after that game, and they could have been on their way out after 2 rounds of the 2001 season. Danny Frawley had to produce something. He certainly did. He produced this tape prior to the Brisbane game, and he played it to his players.
Come, all ye young rebels, and list while I sing. For the love of one's country is a terrible thing. It banishes fear with the speed of a flame. It makes us all part of the patriot game. My name is O'Hanlon, and I've just gone 16. My home is in Monaghan, 'tis where I was weaned. Well, I learned all my heroes, and I wanted the same, to play out my part in the with a local battalion of the full IRA. And I gave up my boyhood to dream and to trade. And so I'm a part of the Patriot game.
It's good stuff. What was the environment? Where did he play that to you?
There's a guy being very modest who's in your ear at the moment, and David Barham did that for us, who's obviously your executive producer here. And I said that you learn a lot about people, you know, when you're down, and David's always been like a good friend of mine, and when things are going badly, he's the one who always gives a call, so he did that for us.
But when did Danny play it?
And then Danny played it before the game, basically. I had a copy of it the day before and played it at my home with a big stereo and everything. It was just... My girlfriend was there and she was crying, and then we played it before the game, and Danny certainly, I don't think he'd mind me saying that he had a few tears, and I think there was tears just everywhere in the room. It was fantastic.
He is a passionate fellow, Danny Frawley, isn't he?
Yeah, he certainly is. He's one of his strengths, I think. Yeah, he's...
This is the Kangaroos' first season. Boy, he was pumped, wasn't he?
But those sleeves rolled right up, didn't he?
You're in the box with him here.
Yeah, what was he like to sit in the box with during those games?
It's an experience.
He stood up at the AGM when he got the job, Wayne, and he said, this club for too long has survived on passion and emotion. You know, I'm going to change all that. I mean, I'm not suggesting that's all that's what he's all about, but he's really brought a new, I don't know, a freshness back into AFL coaching, hasn't he?
Yeah.
How do you all respond to that?
I think he said at the time, you've got to have the passion to play and to coach, and us as players were sick of reading the headline that every time we won, we only won because of passion. And we love the passion of the Richmond supporters and the way they get behind us, but we didn't want to be known as a team that just won because it was backs against the wall or something like that. We wanted to win games just because we're a good footy club. And so he wanted all that, you know, to stop, and we wanted that to stop as well, but certainly that didn't stop the passion of, you know, him acting that way and the players showing that they're, you know, happy to be with each other.
There are half a dozen new captains in the competition this year, including you. Mark Rasciuto is one of them. He'd had a dreadful day against Port Adelaide. So frustrated because he hadn't been able to play. His heart might have been racing that day. Boy, it was racing at Optus, wasn't it?
Well,
How did he... I mean, I've got to be honest. I mean, if that was an unduly rough play against Lance Whitwell, I'll go he. But boy, didn't he turn the game.
He was fantastic.
He was. It's about as good as you could ever see a captain play.
He's a powerful player, and Wayne, when we went to Ireland last year, it's the first time I'd seen him up close, and he is a leader, isn't he?
Yeah, he certainly is. I've been to Ireland twice with him, and certainly you wouldn't meet... I mean, just his reputation around the league is one of just a tremendous bloke and leader and everything like that, and that certainly comes out in those Ireland games, but it certainly came out on the weekend. I watched a bit of that game, and he was probably the difference in the end.
Speaking of leadership, another leader who was in trouble last year, Shane Crawford, told me that you helped him out to some small but significant degree when he was struggling with his form. Did you ring him up and just give him a bit of a...
Yeah, pretty small, I think. Yeah,
well, he was significant enough for him to mention.
Yeah, I gave him a call. And I mean, we were good friends. We did a TV show together, which wasn't that successful, but it was fantastic. And just through that time, I learnt that he was a guy that was really, to use that word, passionate about his footy club and loved his footy club, loved his teammates for all the, you know, the tips in his hair, and he likes looking in the mirror and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that, but he's just a guy that, he's just a real footballer and loves his club and everything. And he was obviously going through a tough trot, and I mean, we speak reasonably frequently. And
you're passionate about your footy club, and you've actually taken Danny and other administrators to task at times, haven't you? I mean, I know you questioned the Nick Daffy decision last year when Nick was suspended.
No, I don't think I did. I questioned something else, but yeah.
Well, you questioned the way it was handled, perhaps?
I certainly didn't question that he was suspended, no.
I mean,
there was something about that, but I can't actually remember what it was about.
But you speak up. I mean, you're not a...
I speak up a bit too much sometimes, Caroline.
I'm not changing the subject, but McManus, did you see the clash?
I saw... I think there was only highlights on Saturday night. And I was actually watching this, and I thought at the time when I saw him go back and have a shot for goal that if he was to kick the goal, they'd win the game almost, because it was just an amazing effort to get up
Anyone who thinks the game is losing its toughness, you only have to have a look at that one incident. The courage of Sean McManus and David Wirrapunda, both of them eyes on the ball and just a full-on body hit. And for him to go back and kick the goal was just wonderful.
Did you see Peter Bell? I mean...
What was he doing?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you probably haven't seen it. Just have a look. What's he doing? Is he doing this to David Wirrapunda? You might be able to help us, Wayne.
Not sure.
No.
Not sure.
We all give up.
Suki Lala, perhaps.
Suki Lala, as good as any.
There were no sooks in that clash, let me tell you.
That is for sure. Well, on that Suki Lala, we'll take a break and we've got plenty more to come on Talking Footy. Stay with us.
We're talking footy.
Win for the club's history, I reckon. Fantastic. And no one gave us a chance, and we just fought our guts out today.
Do you reckon Dipper would have said to Jars, what about 97 and 98 when you won the flags? But, boy, it is an emotional game.
Well, it is. They hadn't won at Optus Oval for something like 9 or 10 years, and in those conditions, no one picked them, so they were pretty pumped, and good to see a 34-year-old get excited like that.
More about the way they won, I guess, than the significance of the 4 points, isn't it? Just
nitty-gritty win, I think in tough conditions, and that's why the Kangaroos down at Geelong, I think they were pretty happy too, because they don't come easy in those conditions.
They're always good games to win, obviously the wet ones, because it's a real struggle, and obviously being 0-3 and so much pressure, and to beat them at Optus Oval. You tend to get a little bit excited after games and say things are probably... I think if you reflected now, you'd say the flags were probably...
They're certainly giving poor old Blighty the flick, aren't they? The President's given him a bit of a sledge over the weekend, and now they're forgetting those 2 flags. But that was as big an upset as the Carlton-Essendon upset.
I reckon bigger in a bookmaking sense. Not as big as Essendon were on the receiving end, but bigger. I reckon Adelaide were longer odds than Carlton. Players are being reborn, aren't they, at a late age? Jarman, forward pocket, half-back flank. Wanganeen in the same state, back pocket, forward pocket.
Best thing that could have happened to Gavin Wanganeen and for Port Adelaide, because he's such a talented player. It was no good Gavin Wanganeen getting 30 possessions across half-back. He needed to go forward and kick 3 or 4 and set a few up. And Darren Jarman actually asked the coach if he could play on the back line. Had never played there before, and pre-season said, that's where I want to play.
I think Wanganeen's just obviously a great player who's been injured for the last couple of years, and obviously he's had that big pre-season that we all talk about, and he's fit, and if a really good player has a good pre-season, they'll end up playing like that, and he's one of the elite.
And it'll be interesting to see how Jarman, if he stays at half-back, and how he plays the season out there. But he's a huge talent. What about Paul Hudson? Another ageing player who didn't show any of that age on the weekend by kicking 8.
Well, I was there to see it, and he was just terrific. He just reads the ball so well. He makes the most of his opportunity. He kicked a lot of goals around his body, and I think we might see him do one here. But he said after the game that Terry Wallace had told him that he would start on the ground. And I think that made all the difference, the confidence to know that you were starting on the ground, because at his age and stage, he's on and off the bench a lot.
Yeah. He did go past Jezza Wolsey and Malcolm Blight on the all-time list. A good 3 notches to have in one afternoon. The Saints, you got a theory? They brought up big. What's your theory? They're struggling Saints.
Too early to tell, Bruce. That's my only opinion. I think it's just four games in. They've got a whole lot of players there that there's, 7 new players, a new coach. It takes a lot longer than a month.
Look, I know Paul, I hope Rosie won't mind. I know here's Harvey, Robert Harvey. This was interesting with Franco, wasn't it?
Well, that's at the opening bounce, and Robert Harvey goes straight for Josh Franco, and that's a bit of a role reversal, because usually the opposition are going for him, but I think he might have made up his mind, well, I'll get on the front foot here.
Rosie said to Tony McGuinness, I hope I'm not talking out of school here, that they didn't buy a Lockett. They didn't buy someone who can make that huge difference that Lockett made to Sydney. They're hard to get, aren't they?
They brought the best that was available, and they brought some pretty handy players. Well, how would Aaron Hamill cope this week, coming up against Carlton? I mean, what...
Oh, I think he'd be obviously a bit edgy, but playing in losing sides is not easy, and they've played in 3 losing games, so your form tends to look worse than what it is. I think Lee Colbert was an example of that. I think Lee Colbert, I watched him pretty closely because he's a Bendigo boy, and his first 3 games I thought were good, because he was just giving it his all. But they lost by 10 goals, so you're not going to play that well.
I reckon Lee Colbert's effort on Sunday down at Geelong was fantastic. He played really well, first time against the old foe at home, and he triumphed. And I think the best of Lee Colbert we will see from now on.
Certainly.
50 metres against Liancelli to Dixon.
Tough call. Have a look at this. He comes in, desperate stage of the game. He makes contact, sure, but, gee, 50 metres. If that's 50 metres, it means that just about every second body contact in the game should be 50. That's a tough call.
Yeah, just a bad decision, I think.
They make them, just like footballers and commentators. Stay put. We'll take a break. Back with more on Talking Footy right after this.
We're talking footy.
The respect the Adelaide players have for Gary Ayres with a demonstrative display at the Optus Oval. Not quite so public, the Kangaroos towards Dennis Pagan, but have a look at this after their win on Sunday.
He hasn't come. Where is he? Is he coming or not?
Well, he was coming. They were waiting for Coach Pagan, weren't they?
And it was a wet day, all right. Even water on the lens there, but it's a great sign of respect that the players waited for the coach to come in. He showed a lot of faith in them, particularly the senior boys, and they didn't let him down.
And it just goes to show we shouldn't listen to rumours because, you know, we'd heard that perhaps the players were losing, their coach was losing touch with his players, and we should also congratulate Dennis Pagan, 200 games.
Terrific effort.
This weekend.
Yeah.
Wayne, Richmond over the last 20 years, one finals appearance, or since 1982. In your time, you've only made the finals once. What is different about this year? Can you say something to the Richmond supporters that makes them feel a bit more confident that you're going to be a finalist this year?
Oh, I think we've spoken a lot over those 20 years and said we're going to do things, and we haven't quite got there, I suppose. But I just think we've got a fantastic coaching staff. The administration's rock solid, as the last two weeks have shown. We've got a really good playing group. We've got some experienced guys who aren't quite over the hill yet. We've got a good middle range group, and we've got some really exciting youngsters with Fiora and Ottens, Dragosevic, these sort of guys. So, and they've got to buy a membership too, don't forget that. They're down a little bit.
You can take a giant step forward Friday night if you can beat West Coast Eagles at Subiaco. Good night. Thanks for coming in, Wayne. It's always a pleasure. Terrific. The captain of Richmond. A reminder, tomorrow's match, Essendon and the Collingwood is live on 7 in Victoria. It was wet, wasn't it, on the weekend, but have a look at some of these scenes from the past. This will remind you of the old days.